Welcome to the Post-Purchase Pro podcast.
This is the only podcast that dives deep into post-purchase marketing to help Amazon sellers increase sales, ranking, reviews, and profits. It's everything that happens after the initial sale that makes a difference. We call this the back end.
Hey everyone, it's your host Dylan Pettichon, and in this episode, we're not actually going to be talking about the back end today and after sale marketing or post-purchase marketing. Today, we actually have a really special one for you. We're going to be talking about guesting on other podcasts and the importance of it. And the guest on this podcast today is Mischa Zvegintzov. I think I got it. Was it good?
You know what? That was fairly good, Dylan. I have to say, with a last name like Zvegintzov, and I've heard it all, you did very well. So thank you.
Awesome. So, I mean, getting into this, I mean, it's an interesting space that you found yourself in, because I really personally can't say I've met many people that do what you're doing right now. And before we really get into that, I wanted to get into like what got you to this point where you are now.
Yeah, where I'm helping people guest speak on podcasts and teaching them not only what to say, when to say it, but how to find them, how to find the emails, how to systemize that process. Yeah. So that's such a great question. I was in old school sales for a good 20, 25 years, telemarketing for a good chunk of it. So I've literally made 1 million hand dial phone calls. If anybody watching or listening remembers the push tone phones. Then I got into auto dialers, where a computer system would dial the phone numbers for you. And then I sent out, flyer campaigns to get the phone to ring, some old school marketing tactics, and door-to-door sales and B2B or business to business, literally going from business to business. And what eventually happened was I temporarily retired to get my kids through high school. I burned out in the mortgage business. I'd been doing it for 15 years, super successful, went through divorce, all that kind of midlife stuff. But when my kids graduated, it was time to reemerge into the entrepreneurial marketing space. And I just love marketing. I love the entrepreneurial game. And so what happened was I jumped into Russell Brunson's $25,000 a year coaching program. This was a few years ago, and I was in there for a few years. And I just, being a good obsessive compulsive, went all in right from the start.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. In hindsight, I probably should have learned a little bit more about what was going on in the online marketing space, but I was like, let's just ramp it up and get after it. But fast forward, what happened was as I was going to all these masterminds, going to Russell Brunson's masterminds, going to Funnel Hacking Live, going to these networking events, all with online marketers, online entrepreneurs of all sorts, I saw that marketers or online sales owners, online business owners are really bad at telling their stories. Us entrepreneurs can be really bad at telling our stories. And not only that, they can be really bad at telling their business stories or their product stories through their customers' eyes, right? So you guys are in the e-commerce space. You have these great follow-up systems. But what helps us sell, whether we're in e-commerce or we're a coach or we're a service provider, is being able to tell our product story through our customers' eyes. Call them testimonials, call them whatever you want, user-generated content, right? Does that resonate?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, perfect. So what happened was as I started a podcast, I started interviewing literally thousands of entrepreneurs, and I start getting customer testimonials, video testimonials for online entrepreneurs. And so I had what was called my perfect video testimonial system, my 5-step system for getting your customers to gladly do your selling for you. And was getting flown around to get video testimonials for businesses, for online entrepreneurs, was getting flown to events, was just interviewing, and I had this imposter syndrome, and I'm not sure if any of your listeners or you perhaps, we can have that imposter syndrome where we're like, am I adding value? Do I know what I'm doing? Should I take the next step? Right. And so I woke up to this email from one of my customers. Her name was Stacy Oliver, and she was flying me out to her events to interview her customers. And I wake up to this email at a time when I was having serious imposter syndrome. And it said, Mischa, you're the one who moves the needle in my business. She said, I pay all these other people. You're the one that drives the revenue in my business. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm adding value. Like this video testimonial stuff is serving people. People are paying me and it's working, right? At the same time, I had a friend who has a show called the Small Business Spotlight. And he said, Mischa, you got to speak to my audience about getting customer video testimonials and about how to repurpose that into micro content because everybody needs that right now, and which is still the case today, literally as we record this, right? We need that video content, we need that micro content. And so he'd been badgering me for a few months, and I get that email from Stacy. Ryan Lipsey is the guy's name. Ryan finally talks me into being on his shows. Go on his show, do an interview like this, and I crush it. I just knew intuitively, like, oh my God, right? I get this flood of engagement. And I was like, I have to go on a podcast tour. And so I did this post on Facebook. It's a very long story. I appreciate you listening.
Oh,
But
no worries. That's
yeah,
why we're here.
yeah, good, good. So I do this post on Facebook. I said, hey, everybody, I'm going to go on a podcast tour. I'm going to take all my skills from when I was in sales back in the day. I'm going to create the templates, the systems, the spreadsheets, how you find the emails, all this stuff. Back in the day, I was the king with data. Like I would mine databases to find the contacts, to send the flyers, to find the phone numbers, to make the phone calls, right? And so I was like, who would want these assets? And I got this flood of engagement. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, us entrepreneurs need help getting our message out there organically, right? There's plenty of help with the paid traffic, with the
Mhm.
Facebook ads and all that. And I was like, I can use my superpowers to help people go guest speak on podcasts. And that's what happened. And from there, I put this offer out and was like, hey, so many of you, I literally did what's called a founding member launch. And put this message out there and I said, hey, I'm going to start this membership. I'm going to teach people how to go on an influence tour, and it's all going to start with guest speaking on podcasts. Who's in? I'm going to build this thing. I'll give you a discounted price to start. And all these people were like, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in. So bam, here we are today. There you go.
Yeah, you must have a framework for this of like how people are supposed to structure that, not only from the podcast that they're reaching out to, but also how they're supposed to present themselves on the podcasts, offering their products, calls to action. But I'm sure there's plenty of other things that we need to know about too when we're actually going and speaking on other people's podcasts, because that's something new to me. I've only ever spoken on our podcast, so going to somebody else's, I'm gonna need to have a little bit more tools in my belt because I'm not the host anymore.
Yeah, that's such a great question, or you frame that so good. And there's the benefits of speaking on podcasts, and I'll start there. And there's 5 or 6 main benefits, and one is literally the call to action. Your listeners, I can guide the listener to a call to action. So anybody who's interested wants to go on a podcast tour, they can go to badzuck.com. Again, BADZUCK, badzuck.com, and join my influence army. This is actually a true thing that I have. I'm only letting people in for the next week or so, but
Mhm.
that's literally what we can do, right? You can go on the podcast, guide someone to a call to action. Then we've got the host. There's partnership opportunities with the host. There's direct recommendations from the host. So Dylan, you could go, oh my gosh, Mischa, this is amazing. I know somebody who needs to go on a podcast tour, and you literally recommend them to me. You might go, oh my gosh, Mischa, I want to go on a podcast tour. I'll hire you. Right. And then we're creating all this amazing content to repurpose and then into reels, TikToks, micro content, call it what you will. There's the obvious branding aspects of it. I'm literally building my brand, the influence army, as I'm talking to you right now, being an expert. And then there's and I'm going to answer your question here. I'll get to it. But I think it's just so important that people know the true value of guest speaking on podcasts. The bonus seventh benefit is that if you commit to guest speaking on podcasts, and let's say you committed to guest speaking in 50 podcasts in 100 days, and you're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to execute on this. I'm going to make it happen. You will be a different person at the end of that journey. You're going to be a better storyteller. You're going to know what to say, when to say it. You're going to be engaging. You're going to be a presence, right? You're going to be a different person. So I like to remind people of that. And the other key things to know are stories, and that's what to say, when to say it, right? So I have my Story Bank Get Your Stories Together worksheet. It's a framework where I teach people how to inventory their stories so they know what to say, when to say it. And when you inventory your stories in the way I teach you how to do it, they organically come up when the question is asked, right? I don't know if you've listened to many podcasts, but sometimes on podcasts, you'll listen and it just sounds like a canned pitch, right? Or sometimes you'll listen and you go, oh my gosh, that's a great answer to that question. And stories are the best way to answer a question, right? And so if you have an inventory of your stories versus just the one story that you're trying to get the message out on, it can be so powerful. So again, it's the Story Bank Get Your Stories Together worksheet. It's my 3-part story collecting worksheet so you can tell the right stories at the right time to capture your audience's attention and inspire them to buy. I have this student, his name's Rick Hayhurst, and he started implementing that framework. And so not only does it help him, now he's so confident when he goes onto a show, right? But also in his networking. So when he's out and about networking at events and trying to create interest for his product, this works for e-commerce too. You know, a lot of e-commerce sellers are out there, feet on the street. They're going to farmers markets. They're going to these shows. What do you call them? Like craft shows or all these kinds of things, trying to, grow their businesses that way. It just gives you that much more confidence. So it's getting your stories in line. The other thing is a lot of e-commerce sellers, for example, are introverts. They're like, I would rather, that's why they're into selling like an e-commerce product. So I have a framework that I teach, which is, let me find it really quick. I forget the name of it sometimes. And am I answering your question? Let me ask you that.
You are. Now, have you found that writing down these stories is helping significantly more than, than just trying to remember things? And the reason I ask that is because as entrepreneurs, we have tons and tons of things that we could tell stories about. Like I have stuff from, the past year that I could talk about story-wise, but if I don't write it down, I am going to eventually forget that. I don't tend to have the best memory, so I feel like having something like that, it's a good way to keep those stories. Not only is writing it down going to make me remember it even more, but I feel like it'll feel more natural when I'm telling it, because it's like I'm going to remember more of the specific details instead of just, oh, it was approximately this, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes amazing sense. And so this is what I teach in my framework. I'll break it down for you because that's such a great question. When I jumped into Russell Brunson's, I literally cut the check for $25,000, started taking action on all this stuff, right? And I'm like, what have I done? My son was like, what have you done? Waylon at the time. But one of the first things that Russell's talked about was creating a story bank. And he's just like, write down your stories, right? Which is great. That's a great idea. Me being a bit more systemized, I needed to create a more solid framework for it. So, what I have people do and what I literally do myself, and I wish I had the pictures of when I on yellow pads, I've got a bunch of yellow pads right down there where I was literally writing out the stories. So I'm going to answer your question. So bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I have people write down the key story arcs of their life. So it starts with your story arcs. There's 4 main story arcs in my life. There's the recovery years. So I got sober when I was 17 years old, right? I was already going to jail and started doing illicit drugs and whatever. Judge Rank tells me I graduated to Judge Rank. Judge Rank says to me, you can go to jail for 6 months or you can go to treatment. What's it going to be? And my life unfolded in front of my eyes. And I was like, no good can come of this path that I'm on if I stay on it. And by the grace of God, Dylan, I got sober, right? And so I've been involved in the recovery community ever since. So I've been straight line sober. And so I do a lot of volunteering to help people get clean and sober. I volunteer at recovery houses. I mentor young men trying to help them out, right? And so I see my life through that lens of recovery, those modalities. And my first story arc is the recovery years. Okay. Then I
Mm-hmm.
had the success years. And you heard me tell a couple of stories about that. I had this incredible success as a salesman for 20 years, right? I was in mortgages, crushing it, stacking money, you know. Then I had and people that were in there were like Zig Ziglar was a mentor of mine back in the day, Brian Tracy, right? And then I've got my death, divorce, failed relationship years, right? That's where I went through divorce, right? All I'd known was success, and all of a sudden I got divorced, and it was brutal, and that's why I retired, right? So I could get my kids through high school. My parents died in rapid succession. More failed relationships. I had this existential crisis, which I spoke to. It brought me to this retiring and then rebirthing into the last story arc, which is the digital marketing years, right? I'm bringing all this
Mm-hmm.
old school knowledge into the new online marketing. But there's my 4 story arcs. So you write down your 4 story arcs, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
within your story arc, you've got your stories, you've got your impactful people stories. So those are the mentors that you stumble across along the way. Judge Rank was so powerful in my life, unfortunately and fortunately, right? And then you've got your customer stories. Okay, so you write down your story arcs, and then you go, what are the important stories within that? Well, there's my personal stories. The people who influence me could be a homeless guy on the street, walking down the street, right? And a homeless guy literally could change the direct trajectory of your life. Or it could be Tony Robbins or somebody like that, or Russell Brunson. You heard me spoke to Russell Brunson. But then you got your customer stories, and customer stories that are like Rick Hayhurst, that client of mine who this exercise changed his business life, right? But let's say it doesn't need to be a customer per se. It could be your mom, it could be your sister, it could be your friend, it could be somebody that you randomly met, that you influence them, right? That what you do has inspired them. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And let me say one last thing while you're thinking of a question. What I do is I just write down a word or two or a phrase or two. I have found you don't need to write out the whole story, if that makes sense,
Oh,
right?
interesting. So you don't write out the details and everything that's part of the story?
Correct. I usually just write down a sentence or two that jogs the memory, and then you can get as detailed as you want. And sometimes I will add details, but I
Mm-hmm.
just am in the habit of adding those stories to my story bank, right? Like we'll probably have an amazing outcome with this interview to some sort. You guys have a great platform. I imagine, I'll get some traction, maybe some leads, something like that from it. And
Of
so
course.
And so, all right, man, when I surprisingly met Dylan, who was this amazing young man, and we had a powerful connection. Does that make
Okay.
sense? And so you
No,
could
that
just
makes sense.
yeah.
For quantifying, because I know there's going to be some number of people out there that are like, okay, I know when I put money into ads that I'm going to get this kind of ROI, or when I pay an influencer to do this, like post my brand, post my product, whatever, I can quantify an ROI. I think that this is something that's a little bit more difficult to nail a number down to, but I think it can be 10 times more valuable if you commit to actually doing this. But would you happen to have anything just to provide an example of some actual case studies of like people going on these media tours where they're touring different podcasts and YouTube channels, platforms, all that?
Absolutely. And people are clicking through oftentimes. And so you can, as you're creating calls to action, you can create custom calls to action for specific podcasts that you go on. So it could be, badzuck.com /, sorry, follow up
Post purchase
pro.
pro?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, so badzuck.com /PPP, for example, or podcast purchase pro, to keep it simple. And then you can track the ROI on that. That can end up being a lot of work, but there are ways to create bit.ly links and things like that. A very loose measure is, as you start speaking on podcasts and doing all these things, like I literally wake up to new leads all the time, right? My email list is building, and the power of what we do, a lot of that power is in the email list. So I'm like, well, they have to be coming from somewhere. Okay. But then a client of mine, Stacy, I have two clients that are awesome. Stacy literally joined the community and got, in rapid succession, it was crazy. She got a $10,000 contract and a $6,000 contract directly related to how she was putting herself out there, right? So those are real quantifiable numbers. And then Carissa secured a $30,000 deal from it, right? So depending on your ticket, or right, these are higher ticket contracts, I guess, or opportunities. But there's that. But one of my favorite stories, and it's not somebody who was in my influence army, but is an e-commerce guy. They sell beef sticks, right? You know what a beef stick, right? Like
Yeah, like a Slim Jim.
Yeah, like a Slim Jim, right? So they created this high-end, healthy, protein-packed Slim Jim. I wish I could remember what the name of it was. I just literally was talking about this on a different podcast, a different e-commerce podcast. But anyway, these guys attribute their success to going on a podcast tour. And what happened was they were going on the podcast. They started out by going to golf events and giving the beef sticks to golfers. So they were following the pro tours, and they found that the golfers loved these beef sticks for their energies, right? For their energy. Fast forward, they start speaking on podcasts. Fast forward, they speak on a podcast. They're getting ROI from people clicking through and buying their beef sticks, right? Next thing you know, someone from Walmart listens to one of the episodes, goes, "We need this beef stick in Walmart," or what's the other one?
Target?
Not Target. What's the not Sam's Club?
Costco.
Costco. Yes, it was either Walmart or Costco.
I love Costco.
Yeah, right. All of a sudden, they're on the shelves of a major retailer like that, and it was either Costco or Walmart. So that's incredible. There's another guy, man. What's his name? Oh my gosh, I just literally was telling these stories. But this one guy, now he's on the board of directors of Foot Locker, and he was the CEO of like Procter and Gamble all of a sudden, but he was this introvert, and he started promoting himself on podcasts as a self-proclaimed introvert. And if you Google his name, gosh, I wish I had it in front of me. I apologize. It's like
No
Tyler
worries.
something. But you Google him, he's literally has been on like 300 or 400 podcasts. It's crazy. But the journey it took him on, and the what it did for him. I mean, now he's on like the board of directors of Foot Locker. It's like crazy. And he was CEO of some corporation. It was crazy. Anyway.
I think it helps a lot with public speaking as well, because before I ever did any public speaking for the company, I did the podcasts, but I also did webinars too for us.
Yes.
Both of those, I want to say, made going up on stage in front of hundreds of people significantly easier. And I think it also helps with leading teams too, because I mean, exactly as you said, you have a framework for how and what to say, and you can just change that depending upon the type of situation you're in.
Yes, absolutely. The guy's name is Tristan Walker, by the way, and the guy's name who became the CEO, his name is Tristan Walker. If you go to listennotes.com, which is a great way to search podcasts for anybody listening, by the way, if you want to find podcasts to speak on, if you put in quotes Tristan Walker and search him, you'll see all these podcasts he spoke on. But he became he created what is it? Here's my notes. He's behind Walker and Company brands and the creator of Bevel, which is a product line that caters to people of color. And so the next thing you know, that's how he was promoting that product, was on podcasts. The next thing you know, it was like Procter and Gamble bought his company and made him CEO, right? Which is crazy. The beef stick guys, you can look them up, it's called Fire Creek Snacks. Fire
I'll
Creek
look that up.
Snacks. Yeah. But anyway, just to answer your question or to speak to what you just said, yes, the more stories you have, you become a more powerful speaker, right? You are better at speaking on the stage. Yeah. I would also say, and you've probably done some of this yourself, some of these tricks, there's how do we present ourselves when we're getting ready to go on a show, right? So I've got my show up as your best you blueprint, which is my 3-step blueprint for instantly captivating any audience with unforgettable authenticity and magnetism, even if you're an introvert or have introvert tendencies. And there's a few ways we can dig into that a little bit if you want to, because I know people, yeah.
I think that would be useful for anybody that if they're going on podcasts or if they're going to be guesting on anybody's YouTube videos. I think it would be really great to know that.
Yeah. Amazing. So one of the things is when I was telemarketing, and you probably have this experience as well, being on webinars and hosting webinars and talking on webinars, but guys like Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar from back in the day, they were constantly telling us sales guys, smile when you're on the phone, smile when you're on the phone, because that energy transfers through the phone. And so anybody listening, watching that wants to go guest speak, smile, right? And train yourself to smile. So I literally had printed out in big font all over my office, smile, smile, smile. I had a smile selfie stick. This is 20 years ago. I had a stick that had a big smile on it. So it would remind me to smile, right? The other thing you want to do is roll your shoulders back, preferably sit up straight. It opens your diaphragm. So the physical presentation. And there is data out there that proves that when you smile, it changes your chemical reactions. Like it improves everything. So does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Cool. And then we've got step 2 is the emotional engagement. So and I call it 7-level excitement. So McCall Jones, who's this amazing stage speaker, and she's like the extrovert of extroverts. She taught me this, and basically what you're trying to do is pull that 7-level excitement story from your life so you can reference it. So if you think of excitement on a 1 to 10, right? So when I had my 2 boys, those are 10-level excitements, right? Or maybe when Dawn, who's the boy's mom, said, "Yes, I'll marry you." That's a 10-level excitement, but that's kind of over the top, right? But the 7-level is excitement is when I was doing my first online virtual summit, hosting my first summit, I started sending out emails to these speakers. And one of them was Anthony Trucks. And he was like my A-list guy. I was like, I hope Anthony Trucks comes on my show or on this virtual summit I was hosting as a speaker. And he replied to me and said, yes. And I'll never forget that day because that was at the beginning of my journey. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. Anthony Truck said yes, right? So you can tell yourself that 7-level story before you jump on a show like this, before you jump on a podcast, right? And so it brings up your energy to that good state, right? But not too over the top. The other thing is when you're speaking on camera like this, it portrays as subdued a little bit. So you have to level up a little bit so you come across as even normal. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah, I usually I don't want to say hype myself up before the calls, but usually I'm standing. Today I was not feeling the best, so that's why I've got the chair in the background. But
Yes.
usually one of my things is I will set my standing desk up because I've found that like I'm more alert and more excited when I'm standing up talking to people.
Exactly. And then when you're standing up, you are naturally rolling your shoulders back. Your diaphragm is open.
Yeah.
Your core is open. So you project better. You speak better. And so when I jump on a podcast, I get a backless stool, right? So it
Mhm.
forces me to sit up straight and then I'm not, slouching and this and that. A lot of this stuff I do by habit just because I've spoken so much. I just naturally fall into that state, which brings me to the last step, which is so important, which is I like to say spiritually centering, like with a prayer or a mantra. So when Judge Rank changed my life that day, it was actually the last day of high school 37 years ago. He's like, hey, treatment or jail, right? I was like, all right, I choose treatment, right? And I had friends who chose jail and are now dead, right?
Wow.
So by the grace of God. Um, in the 12-step modalities, a few things are happening. One is it's basically trust God, clean house, work with others. And so you're taught to reduce your ego, trying to find something outside of yourself that you can lean into, right? And a lot of people say God, or if you're in a church, oh, thank you, Apple. Um, or the universe or anything other than yourself. So it's like find a source that you can lean into for inspiration. Clean house is learn how to take accountability for your actions. So at that time I was kind of a wild man, and so I needed to learn how to like take accountability for the chaos that I was creating. The last thing is how can I be of service? And these things quell the ego or help keep your ego in line. And so on one of my favorite pieces of literature, it's like page 102, I'm not sure where it is. It basically says you can go anywhere and do anything as long as you're spiritually centered and have a service mindset. So when I read that however many years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I came up, this little prayer dropped into my lap of like, how can I be of service and what can I bring to the table? How can I be of service and what can I bring to the table? So before I jump on a show like this, I'm like, how can I serve Dylan? How can I serve Dylan's audience? What can I bring to the table? And then let the chips fall where they may, right? And I found for me, a lot of people are like, oh, that might be woo woo, but serves me and it's helped me have an amazing life. So
If it works for you and works for the people you're coaching, I mean, that's what matters.
yeah, right. And you might
Um,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know personal branding is a huge component of this as well. Um, and I want to make sure that that is highlighted because I've seen more businesses built off of personal brands in like the blink of an eye than anything else I have seen created. Like, I mean, for example, you can take Kylie Jenner's brand, Kylie Cosmetics, as an example. I want to say it was within a year, was it that she went from already millionaire, whatever, but to billionaire because she's an influencer. And you've got Hormozy now, which I see you have Hormozy's book in the back. I know he was doing a launch for his course, and my friends were ready to pull out their credit cards and pay whatever he was going to charge them for that course.
I,
Like they were just behind it because it was Hormozy. So,
yeah. Yeah. So you're kind of bringing in together all the things that we've been talking about, right? So, how do you create a brand? It's through story, right? I've told a
mhm,
lot of stories. I've told stories about, my old sales career, about some vulnerable stories perhaps that are easy for me to tell, but they can make some people uncomfortable, but about, different parts of my life. So as I'm telling those stories, I'm building my brand. People are going, whether consciously or subconsciously, they know what I'm about, right? And so, have you heard Myron Golden, for example? You know who Myron Golden is?
I don't.
Russell Brunson, even Russell Brunson's
I
another
know
guy. I mean,
Russell.
yeah, Russell, and
Yeah.
Russell these days more and more is talking about his Mormonism and God and things like that. And Myron's very open about his church and all those things, and good nor bad, that's just the facts. And so
Hmm.
he they're pulling in people like that, and they're also creating some polarism
Hmm.
polarizing, right? So we want to be a little polarizing. Russell Brunson talks about that. He's like, hey, you got to be a little polarizing. And so if I'm out here talking about things that I value that are important to me, and you should pray before you go on a podcast, someone's either going to go, heck yeah, I love that, I'm all about being of service, I'm all about being centered, versus someone else could be go, that's some woo woo BS, man. Forget that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
I could see
So,
both sides. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we have to be willing to take a little bit of a risk, right? Hermosi, Alex is very much hustle mentality, hustle culture, right? Like he's like, he who works the hardest wins. He who gets up first and works wins. Like a lot of his video clips are like, all you fools, in effect, all you fools who'll get up and pray and meditate or work on your routine and have this crazy routine, like you're falling behind. You need to get to work right away.
Yeah, like the ice baths and the red light saunas and whatever else. Journaling, I know, is a big thing. There's a lot. I think to that point, I get that that's his polarizing point. If that helps somebody actually do the work, fantastic. Just don't let it be like 3 hours of your workday is spent journaling and doing an ice bath and a red light sauna.
Exactly, Dylan. Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, so we how we show up, how we present ourselves, the stories we tell, we're trying to be a little polarizing, be authentic to who we are. You can say it all sorts of different ways, and then we're building our brand. And the storytelling is the most important. I've spoken to frameworks as well. Alex Hermosi is incredible at frameworks. And he literally will call things frameworks, but he's
Mhm.
always talking as well in like step one, step two, step three, point one, point two, point three, right? These little frameworks, these little systems, these little tricks, do this, this, and this, one, two, and three, A, B, and C, right? So that's another valuable way to build your brand is to talk like that. And then, Alex and Kylie, I mean, I
Layla.
don't follow
Oh,
Kyla.
sorry.
Yeah, what's her name? Jenner,
Wrong.
the Jenner girl.
Okay, I thought you were talking about Alex's wife, Layla, but
Oh, no,
yeah,
no, no, no,
Kylie
no,
Jenner.
no, no. I was talking about the Jenner girl. I mean, she just is amazing. What an amazing woman she is, what amazing team she has. I mean, incredible the way they built that brand. And yeah, she's a
Mhm.
billionaire at 29 or whatever it was. But Alex, I mean, really is the master at going on interviews like this and repurposing that content into shorts and clips and reels and and just pumping that content out there. Right.
Yeah, on podcasts and everything too. Like
Yep.
he'll take snippets of that and put it on the game, which is his podcast.
Yeah. Brand building, right? He's the
Yeah,
master by doing what we're doing right here. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And speaking of badzuck.com, you had a special offer for all the listeners today. Could you detail that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, and I'm going to leave this going for another week or two. Let's say 10 days from right now, from February 8th, 11:47 Pacific Standard Time. No. Basically, go to badzuck.com. And if you join my influence army, which is normally $97 a month, for this first month, you can try it for $7, 100% money back guarantee. So if you are unhappy with, you're like, hey, this is too much for me, or I don't like it, or it doesn't resonate, or what have you, no questions asked within that first 30 days. The $7 is less than taking your friend to a cup of coffee. I mean,
Yeah,
you
no
can jump in
brainer.
the yeah, no brainer. And I've got my
Taking
go ahead.
I was gonna say taking your friend to a cup of coffee. That around here, if you go to Starbucks, that is a coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I'll say this too. Anybody who I don't have the doors to my Influence Army membership open all the time.
Mhm.
So I open them and then close them. So they're open right now for anybody of your audience who's listening. But if you happen to catch this on a replay and you go to badzuck.com to take advantage of this offer and the doors are closed, you'll be put on the wait list. And so the next time I open the doors, you could have an opportunity to come in. But there's coaching involved in it. There's 3 group coaching calls a month. There's all the frameworks. There's how to find podcasts, how to find the emails, how to sit. I've got the templates for the scripts, all the stuff, how to create your bio, everything. Like and we're implementing, like I said, we've got 3 group coaching calls a month. So lots of good stuff in there.
Well, that is awesome. I would go take advantage of that. I mean, $7, you could spend it at Starbucks or you could spend it on this. And like you said, there's a money back guarantee. So there you go. May, take it away.